All right, so we are gonna get ready to paint our Grand Teton scene. I love to use an old clipboard from the thrift store. I bought this for $1 at a local thrift store because I like to tape it here with some masking tape so that I have really nice crisp borders. So let me get this straight here. Just press it very firmly. And then this also allows you to manipulate the painting like this and move paint or water over your painting while still achieving that crisp border. It's better than just taping it right to your table. So that's one thing I really like for smaller paintings. This is just painter's tape, actually. That's meant for delicate walls. I find it works well on paper because it doesn't pull up or tear your paper. So that's a good tip. And you don't need to get scientific here. The trick is to press it down fairly hard and go over it a couple times with your finger or thumb so that it does establish a really nice crisp border. All right, so we are ready to paint. I've got my blotter towel, my swatch chart, and my 2 sets of paint. And I think for this one, I'm going to actually use the Death Valley paint to get a little bit more blue and purple into this mountain scene. Like, especially in the mountains, you have like a lot of blue and purpley type colors as you're in the high, thin atmosphere. So I really love to paint with blues and purples, but that is by no means a rule. You're welcome to paint whatever color suits your heart. So I'm gonna start with the mountains. No hard, fast rule there. You can also start with the sky if you like. This is the north side of the Grand Teton, so I know that the sun rarely touches this side of the mountain. So I know that it's gonna be quite a bit darker than the rest of my composition because it's always in shadow. So I'm gonna start with a darker purple and also probably add a little bit of this even darker hue to try and create the darkest value in my painting here on this dark north side that we've got ourselves situated on as we start here. So again, I don't want to do anything on the sky until this portion of my painting is dry, because I don't want the colors that I'm using to create my mountain, I don't want those bleeding into the sky. So I'm going to wait until this section of painting is totally dry until I tackle my sky. So that's kind of the method to my madness here. So again, I'm kind of continuing to add pigment here. This particular purple pigment is not very staining, so I'm applying quite a bit of pigment to achieve the intensity that I really want to get for the shadows on the north side of this mountain. I'm gonna add a little brown too. Purple and brown often play very well together, and we'll get some nice gradations and mixing once this dries. So just add it where your finger feels called. There's no rules or reason behind what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of allowing my flow to take over. So this shape is kind of coming out like this. It's meant to be like a valley. So I would like a little bit less intensity in color there. There might be a little bit of shadow as we meet the bottom here because that's a northwest facing valley. This I painted from Teton Canyon on the west side of the Tetons, which is not as typical of a view. So it's not from the park where most people see the Grand Teton. So I really like this subtly gray, chalky color. I'm kind of tracing the contours of this valley to create a sense of movement and depth in our ridgeline here. Now if you go over the bounds of your line here, no worries, just wet that portion and pick it up with your towel. Super easy to fix. I like this paper and paint combo because they are very forgiving. Sometimes you won't have paints or paper that play quite so nice, but these are great. These are really awesome paints for beginners because they are so forgiving. So I'm gonna add a little depth here with some darker blue and just trace some of these contours. You can see it's pretty subtle, but I like that. Again, no right or wrong here. Let your preference dictate how this works. So this geology is just so interesting. I wish I knew more about it, but I'm just gonna go with the flow of my contour lines here and just paint what calls to me. I really love that subtle red. I might mix it with a little brown and create a really nice earthy tone here. So again, we're working with the wet on dry technique here. Totally up to you. Either technique is wonderful. I just wanted a little more control here as I work along this southwest flank of the Grand Teton. I'm just adding subtle hints of color. Those will dry really nicely. You can see in the desert painting I've practiced painting, adding more color kind of ends up with some really neat variation in there. So all we're doing is experimenting here. We can't go wrong. It's fun to think about painting with these paints because, as I mentioned before, they were created from natural pigments and soil. So it's cool to think about painting with this as we're painting this enormous hulking landform. I don't actually know what it's made of, if it's granite or limestone. I want to say limestone because it was once a seafloor, so that makes sense to me, but don't quote me on that, I could be totally wrong. So I kind of enjoy the process of painting with these paints, knowing that they came from the soil while we're painting these amazing landscapes. It's just kind of a neat trajectory here. So you can see I have no plan. I'm just going in and applying marks where my brush feels called to go. And that's what I like about watercolor. It is a really organic process, and I find that I can shut my brain off a little bit and just see where the brush takes me. It's not quite so, you know, you don't really have to plan it out. You can, certainly, but it also works well when you don't. So I'm gonna bring some of this brown down into my blue and purple here to just make it more interesting. I don't know. See what works. And as we reach the crown of this mountain, I'm gonna work with that gray that we had in our Castle Valley palette. This is a great gray. I really like it. It does remind me a lot of seashells or chalk, and I love how translucent it is. So I'm gonna revert back to my mixing chart. I kind of want a little bit of a, maybe this color, that looks good. So it's number 2 in blue from our Moab palette. He needs a little water. So I'm gonna mix that up. That's looking good. Yeah, I like that. Nice. Okay, so we're gonna wait until that is dry to complete the sky. So hang out, practice on your swatches card if you like, and maybe wait about 10 minutes until this painting is dry before we tackle the sky. Okay, so this portion of the painting is dry. You can tell by actually touching the painting. And I'm gonna go for a blue sky. My palette is a little bit of a mess here, so I might just scooch some of this water into my palette. And I'm gonna go wet on wet this time, so I'll start, and this is where the clipboard comes in really handy. I'll start by at the top and just kind of slowly feed water down. Again, a larger brush with a flat shape is great for skies. This round brush is a little on the small side. It'll suffice for a smaller painting of this size, but if we were working much bigger, we definitely want a bigger brush. So I'm tracing the contours of this mountain and then bringing the water down. Just trying to get everything very evenly distributed. I don't want any dry spots. And you can confirm by looking at your painting at eye level. I can see I've missed a couple spots here, and I might want to add a little more water in this zone. So I'll double check, that looks great. And then we can add some pigment. So I'm gonna mix a pretty wet, juicy blue here. Again, remember I said you want to have plenty of color available for your sky. I'm definitely making a mess of my Art of Soil card here, but that's okay. Part of being an artist is making a giant mess, so don't be afraid of that. And again, once these dry out, you can use them again. That's the cool part about watercolor, is you can always reactivate the paints with just a little bit of water. They certainly do get a little old and crusty after a while, but these can be reactivated with water with no problem. All right, I'm gonna go for a slightly darker color, so I'm gonna pick up a little bit of that, mix it in, add a little more water, mix it in. Okay, I'm ready now. So I'm gonna start, because the horizon line is often a lighter color blue than the sky that you'll see overhead. I'm gonna pick up pigment and just trace the contour of this mountain. You can see, because I have my clipboard tilted, that the pigment's just running down the page thanks to our friend gravity. And you can add more. Just quickly wash it away here. Remember, we're going through that kind of graded wash. I'm hoping to achieve a little more intensity of blue at the top of the page, but I'm not attached to outcome because what are we doing? We're working with watercolor. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of this paint and water that's pooling at the bottom of the page here. I can see it's affecting the stickiness of my tape. So that might affect our ability to get a crisp line there once we pull the tape out, but that's okay, we're just practicing. So next I'm gonna add more pigment up top and let it run the opposite way. It might be hard to see on the camera, but I can visualize the pigment running down now. I might add a little bit of this purpley brown to get a more intense color up top here. It's subtle, but it's there. And if you wanted to pick up a little bit of pigment here along the horizon, you can dry off your brush. Oop, it might be too dry now. Yeah, it looks like it is. That's okay. Again, we're just super chill. We're not trying to create a masterpiece here. We're trying to learn. That's our goal. So if you end up producing a painting that you're not wild about, that's okay. Just think about the things that you learned today while you created this painting. And therein lies the value of this exercise. So I'm gonna let this dry for a bit before I remove the tape. And then we'll be all set with our Teton scape here. One tip I find really helpful with brushes is you definitely don't want to leave your brush in your water ever. That creates a problem where the bristles will bend, and it just affects the performance of those bristles. So I always dry my brush off and set it to dry right here on the paper towel. Because drying it like this, the water can seep down into the glue that holds the bristles to the, I think this is called a ferrule, and that's not the best. So it's best to let them just dry on a horizontal on a piece of paper, and just wash them out with a little bit of water and make sure not to leave them in the jar. Okay, so we're all dry and ready to go here. I'm gonna peel back the paint, or not the paint, excuse me, the tape. And we've got some nice crisp lines. Again, if this is totally dry, you can, and you've got a little bit of buckling on the paper, you can press it with a heavy book, and that's helpful. So yeah, we are all set with our Teton painting here. It's kind of a moody day or a moody night. You're welcome to try it with a sunset or more bright, vibrant colors. I definitely went for cooler colors this time, but I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and we will work with some reds and browns in our next painting for the with the desert scene. So check that out next. So thank you so much for joining me and purchasing this watercolor kit. I hope you learned some great beginner tips with this, with these different lessons and the 2 scenes that we painted. Feel free to go forth and continue using up your Art of Soil palettes here. You've got a solid foundation to keep going, and I hope you enjoy it. Even just 5 or 10 minutes of watercoloring a day has made me so much happier and calmer, and it's so rewarding. So I hope you had a similar experience and learned some new skills today with me. You can always check out my actual paintings on my website. That's www.kapowder.com, Kapowder, and follow along on Instagram at Kapowder as well. Thanks again, and happy watercoloring!